The rooftop glowed with string lights and curated ambience jazz humming from discreet speakers. Couples clinking glasses, and Brooklyn's skyline sparkling just out of reach. Isaiah sat across from Claire, her expression flat beneath the flicker of candlelight. "I can't be with someone who has no future," she said, carefully slicing her salmon as though the words didn't shatter anything. Isaiah's breath caught. Not because she ended things, he had felt her slipping for weeks. Because of how precisely the blade found its mark. No future. Not we've grown apart. Not it's not working. Just a declaration, cold and final, that he was disposable. He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. Okay, but the okay wasn't resignation. It was protection. Armadot, she kept talking something about ambition, about how she was getting older and needed someone more stable. But Isaiah barely heard her. His mind was already spiraling through every dinner where she'd teased his side hustle like it was a personality quirk. Every time her parents said things like, "You're so passionate must be a creative," type with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. Every moment she'd praised him for being grounded, when what she meant was tame. His wineglass trembled in his hand. He set it down before it could fall. "Maybe it's for the best," Claire said, finally standing. Her chair scraped back sharply. "You'll land on your feet, I'm sure." He didn't respond, just watched as she walked away, her silhouette swallowed by rooftop shadows and well-dressed strangers. Alone now, Isaiah stared out across the city. The buildings rose like giants and bothered, unbroken, unapologetic. His reflection in the glass barrier looked back at him, faint and wavering, like a version of himself he'd been trained to silence. A server passed with a tray of creme brulee. Isaiah declined. He sat there a while longer, not mourning Claire, but mourning the quiet way he'd allowed himself to be made small below. The hum of traffic and sirens blurred into something familiar, and for the first time in a long while, Isaiah didn't feel lost. He felt ready. Next, the resume and the mirror asterisk. The morning after the rooftop dinner, Isaiah woke to silence. No missed calls, no texts from Claire, just the blinking cursor of his email inbox and the sting of her final words, no future. He sat at the edge of his bed, one foot on the hardwood, the other resting on a stack of resumes he'd printed on heavy cream paper. The kind they say makes an impression. He'd used the same font Claire once called clean but creative. He remembered her voice now teasing but sharp. "I mean, babe, you're an artist, but like, you're not really making art. Right, not full time." Her parents had been more blunt. Last Christmas, her father leaned in over bourbon and whispered, "You ever think about tech? Lots of options out there for a smart guy like you. Something stable." He thought of the unfinished self-portrait waiting in the other room. Brushstrokes frozen in mid-expression. A face half-formed. Like him, that afternoon, Isaiah sat in a conference room uptown, dressed in a blazer that always felt a size too tight around his truth. The recruiter smiled too much. "We're just not sure you're the right cultural fit," she said. Cultural fit. Two words that felt like code. Again. That night, he pulled the self-portrait off the easel and placed it next to his latest rejection letter. One canvas, one resume. Both incomplete stories. He stared into the mirror hanging across the room. The glass caught the reflection of both the bold lines of his painted face and the polite bullet points on white paper. He whispered aloud, "Which one of you is me?" Outside, a car honked. The city didn't pause. But Isaiah stood, his shoulders straighter than the day before. In the quiet, he picked up the brush not because anyone believed in him, but because he finally needed to believe in himself. Next, "You sound so angry when you're just speaking, asterisk, asterisk." The brush dropped gently into the jar of murky water. Isaiah sat back, eyes lingering on the portrait he could finally admit was of himself, not curated, just him. But memory had a rhythm of its own. He was 7 the first time a teacher said, "You're so articulate," like it was a surprise. His mother smiled with pride, and he did too, not knowing yet what that smile would one day cost him by 13. He'd mastered the pause before speaking, the tone that landed as not. "You're not like the others," someone's uncle had once said at a summer barbecue, patting his back like a prize. "You're the good kind. Good, exceptional, well-behaved, a student of the year with tired eyes and tight shoulders." In high school, his guidance counselor pushed Ivy League dreams, but only if he could write his essay about overcoming the odds, as if the only way to be worthy was through trauma neatly tied with a bow. At every dinner Claire took him to, he was the trophy they didn't admit they were showing off. "He's an artist and went to Columbia," Claire would beam, before nudging his knee under the table. "But don't worry, he's super chill. My parents love him." "You make people comfortable," she once told him, in bed, her hand tracing his jaw. He'd taken it as a compliment. Back then, now, he knew better. Making people comfortable had kept him exhausted. Performing safety in rooms that never saw his fullness. Swallowing rage so others could keep sipping wine. He stood in his small kitchen, opening the window to let in fresh air and truth. Being praised for excellence hadn't protected him. It had only made him more palatable, easier to dismiss. As the wind stirred his half-dried canvas, Isaiah whispered into the dark, "I don't want to be the exception. I want to be whole." Next, "You sound so angry when you're just speaking." The next morning, Isaiah stood outside the gallery in a collared shirt he hated. He'd emailed, followed up, even dropped off a portfolio in person. They'd said, "We love your perspectives, such raw emotion." But then ... silence ... inside. The space gleamed sterile modern, untouched by the world it pretended to reflect. He wandered between the exhibits, hoping to see his own piece tucked discreetly in a corner. But instead, he found a canvas titled Urban Echo, harsh lines, broken faces, a backdrop of chain-link fences and fire escapes, all painted by a man named Connor, the white artist Claire had once called gritty. The curator hovered nearby, speaking to donors in polished tones. "He really captures the pain of the inner city. So visceral." Laughter followed. Wine. Glasses clinked. Isaiah stood still, invisible in plain sight. He glanced at the piece again. It didn't feel like an echo. It felt like theft. He shifted the weight of his own painting, still wrapped under his arm. The brushstrokes he'd laid with memory, the textures born of lived experience. The portrait of his uncle's worn hands and tired joy remained unseen, uninvited. Isaiah didn't feel defeated. Not this time. He walked out slowly, the door clicking shut behind him. The buzz of neon outside the gallery washed over him as the noise inside faded. The silence wasn't a void, it was space. Space for something he would build himself. He glanced down at his own work, still tucked against his side like a truth he refused to compromise. Too raw, maybe. Too honest, absolutely. But this time, Isaiah didn't shrink. He crossed the street, clutching his painting with more certainty than shame. Next, "You sound so angry." When you're just speaking asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The canvas lay flat on the floor of Isaiah's studio apartment, finished, streaked with deep blue and rust. His fingers, still smudged with paint, hovered over his journal. He stared at the word he'd written in bold letters. Okay, he had said it on the rooftop, like it was defeat. But now, under the hum of the city, through his open window, it felt different. It wasn't submission, it was survival. It was the first thing he said that didn't ask for permission. Okay, he wrote again, slower this time. Then, I'm done performing for people who only clap when I shrink. The buzz of a notification blinked on his phone. Claire's name, again. He let it glow, untouched. Then, calmly, deliberately, he deleted the contact. It didn't feel like erasing her. It felt like reclaiming him. He turned back to the canvas. This one wasn't neat or calculated. It didn't try to speak in metaphors or codes. It wasn't palatable. It was just truth, messy, uneven, raw. He titled it Boundaries. He took a photo and uploaded it to his public art page. No filters, no captions. Just the work. As he hit post, a breeze drifted in, catching the edge of the canvas. He watched the light shift across the floor, turning the blues into something closer to indigo-rich, alive. Isaiah leaned back, paint on his forearms, the hum of passing cars below grounding him. This wasn't a new chapter. This was the title page. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like proving anything. He just felt whole. And when the first comment appeared, "This feels like breath," he smiled. Not for validation, but because it was his. Asterisk, asterisk, the old storefront on Malcolm Avenue had once been a bodega. Now, for one night only, it was filled with color, music, and voices that refused to whisper. Isaiah stood just inside the entrance, adjusting the name tag on his hoodie. Curator, not guest. Around him, canvases stretched across the walls like declarations. Black futures now, the banner read above the makeshift gallery lights. Not in 10 years, not in theory. Now he had spent weeks calling artists, securing the space, borrowing ladders, and printing flyers. He never asked permission. He built a table when no one gave him a seat. Now, people filed in, strangers, friends, neighbors. A girl barely 16 pointed at a portrait and said, "That's how I feel when I'm quiet, but still loud." 2 older men wiped their eyes in front of a piece that mirrored the streets they'd grown up on. No one asked Isaiah to explain himself. No one told him he was too much or not enough. They simply saw him. And then Claire walked in. She stood by the doorway, her arms folded, hesitation written across her face. Her eyes scanned the room, and for a second they met Isaiah's. He nodded once, not cold, not angry. Just done. She took a step forward. He turned instead toward an elder artist named Mr. Evans, who'd once told him, "Your voice matters, even if the world pretends it doesn't." Isaiah smiled and clasped the man's shoulder. This moment wasn't about proving anything to an ex who never understood. It was about honoring the people who always did. Later that evening, a young boy asked Isaiah how he got here. "We didn't wait to be chosen," Isaiah said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "We made our own future." The crowd kept growing. Stories kept spilling onto canvases and into conversations. Isaiah stood among them not as someone recovering from loss, but as someone who had finally reclaimed what was always his. Outside, night wrapped the city in a hush. Inside, laughter bounced off the walls like music. Isaiah took a breath and closed his eyes. he belonged, and tomorrow he'd begin again. Asterisk, asterisk, the recording light blinked red. Isaiah adjusted the headphones over his lokes. The soft hum of the studio surrounding him. Across from him sat Lena Hart, a cultural journalist known for her unapologetically honest interviews. The studio was sleek, warm-toned, with acoustic panels that dulled the outside world. Inside, it was just voice, memory, and meaning. So, Lena leaned forward, elbows on the table. Let's talk about the title of your latest exhibit. Permission Withdrawn. Where did that come from? Isaiah smiled, not the kind he used to give out of politeness, but one anchored in truth. A year ago, he began, someone I loved told me she couldn't be with someone who had no future. He paused, not to dramatize, but to breathe. At the time, it crushed me. But now, I think, maybe she was right. That version of me didn't have a future, not because of who I was, but because I kept asking the world to validate it. Lena nodded, letting the silence stretch just enough. And now I build futures. Not just mine. I show up for others, artists, kids, anyone who's ever been told to stay small. We don't wait for green lights anymore. We paint the road ourselves. There was a beat of quiet. The red recording light blinked steadily between them, capturing something bigger than sound. Lena's voice softened, and Claire. Isaiah chuckled, not bitter, not regretful, just done. She told me I had no future, he said, but maybe it just didn't include her. The studio fell into a reverent hush. He continued, voice steady, tomorrow belongs to those who stop waiting for permission to dream. Lena leaned back, amen, as the outro music played and the host thanked him. Isaiah removed the headphones. Outside the booth window, the world carried on, horns honking, trains rattling through the Bronx. But inside, he was weightless. He stood, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked out into the sunlight. Tomorrow wasn't a question mark anymore. It was already here, and it was his.